The cold bit through Sylvia Anderson's threadbare coat like 1,000 tiny knives as she stumbled through the snow-covered trail, her vision blurring with tears that froze on her cheeks before they could fall. Behind her, the wagon tracks were already disappearing under fresh powder, erasing the path her husband had taken when he drove away with everything they owned, leaving her stranded 15 miles outside Carson City, Nevada, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart shattered into pieces too small to ever mend. The December wind of 1875 howled through the pines, and Sylvia's legs trembled with each step, her body betraying her will to survive as the world tilted sideways and the white ground rushed up to meet her face. She did not remember falling, only the sudden absence of cold, replaced by a numbness that felt almost peaceful. Her mind drifted to warmer times, to the man she had married 3 years ago in Philadelphia, to the promises he had made about their new life out west. Thomas had been charming then, handsome in his pressed suits, eloquent in his declarations of love. But the West had changed him, or perhaps it had simply revealed what had always been hiding beneath the surface. The mining claim that never produced gold, the debts that piled higher each month, the way his eyes had grown cold when he looked at her, as if she were just another burden he could not afford to carry. The sound of hoofbeats penetrated the fog in her mind, distant at first, then closer. Sylvia tried to lift her head, but her body would not respond. She heard a man's voice, deep and urgent, shouting something she could not understand. Then strong hands were turning her over, and she found herself staring up into a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of summer grass that looked at her with an intensity that cut through her delirium. "Madam, can you hear me?" The man's voice was rough, but not unkind, carrying the drawl of someone who had spent years under open skies. "Stay with me now. I am going to get you somewhere warm." Sylvia tried to speak, but her lips would not form words. The man lifted her as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against a chest that smelled of leather and wood smoke. She felt herself being settled onto a horse, held secure by arms that wrapped around her like a fortress. The world swayed and moved, and then there was nothing but darkness. When consciousness returned, it came slowly, like swimming up through deep water. Sylvia became aware of warmth first, blessed warmth that seemed to seep into her bones. She heard the crackle of a fire, felt the softness of blankets heavy on top of her. Her eyes fluttered open to find herself in a small cabin, rough-hewn logs chinked with mud, a stone fireplace dominating one wall where flames danced and threw shadows across the room. She was lying in a bed, dressed in an oversized flannel shirt that was not her own, her wet clothes hanging on a line strung near the fire. "You are awake." The voice came from her left, and Sylvia turned her head to see the man who had found her sitting in a wooden chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. In the firelight, she could see him more clearly. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that touched his collar and a face that was handsome in a rugged, unpolished way. He wore denim pants and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. "How are you feeling?" "Cold," Sylvia whispered, though in truth the shivering had stopped. "Tired." "That is to be expected. You nearly froze to death out there." He stood and moved to a small stove in the corner, pouring something from a pot into a tin cup. "Can you sit up? You need to drink this." With effort, Sylvia pushed herself upright, accepting the cup he offered. The liquid inside was broth, rich and salty, and it burned pleasantly as it went down. She drank slowly, feeling strength return in small measures. "Thank you," she said, when the cup was empty. "You saved my life." "Just happened to be riding back from town at the right time." He took the cup from her and set it aside. "Name is Pierce Lambert. I have a ranch about 2 miles from here, but I keep this line cabin stocked for when I am working this section of the property." Sylvia Anderson. She pulled the blankets tighter around herself, suddenly aware of her vulnerability. "I do not know how I can repay you." Pierce shook his head. "No repayment needed. But I would like to know what you were doing out in a blizzard, dressed like that, with no horse or supplies." His eyes were steady on hers, not accusing but genuinely concerned. "You running from something?" The question broke something open inside her, and before Sylvia could stop herself, the whole story came tumbling out. She told him about Thomas, about the journey west, about the mounting debts, and her husband's increasing anger. She told him about waking that morning to find Thomas hitching the horses to their wagon, about how she had begged him not to leave her, about the cold finality in his voice when he said he was going to San Francisco to start over, and she was not part of those plans. "He said I was a millstone around his neck," Sylvia heard herself say, her voice breaking. "He said if I had been any kind of proper wife, I would have found a way to help him instead of being another mouth to feed. He drove away and did not look back, not even once." Pierce's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. That is not a man. A real man does not abandon his wife in the middle of nowhere in winter. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the falling snow. "You have family back east? Someone you can send word to?" Sylvia shook her head. "My parents died of fever when I was 17. Thomas was all I had." The reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave. "I have nothing. No money, no home, nowhere to go." "You have somewhere to go," Pierce said, turning back to face her. "At least for now. You can stay here until you are recovered, and then we will figure out what comes next." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "I am not asking. You nearly died today, and I will not have it on my conscience if something happens to you because I turned you out too soon." Tears spilled down Sylvia's cheeks, hot and unexpected. "Why are you being kind to me? You do not even know me." Pierce crossed the room and crouched beside the bed, his expression serious. "My mother raised me to believe that how we treat people when they are at their lowest says everything about who we are. You need help, and I am in a position to give it. That is all there is to it." Over the next 3 days, Sylvia slowly regained her strength. Pierce rode out each morning to tend to his cattle, returning in the afternoon with supplies and food. He was unfailingly polite, sleeping in his bedroll near the fire while she kept the bed, never making her feel uncomfortable or imposing, despite the strangeness of their situation. He cooked simple but hearty meals, seemed content with comfortable silences, and answered her questions about his life with an openness that surprised her. He had come to Nevada 5 years earlier, he told her, after his father died and left him a small inheritance. He had bought 200 acres of grazing land and built his ranch from nothing, running cattle and breaking horses to sell. It was hard work, often lonely, but it was his, and that meant everything to a man who had spent his youth working other people's land for wages that barely kept him fed. "Do you never get tired of it?" Sylvia asked on the third evening as she helped him prepare dinner, her legs finally steady enough to stand for more than a few minutes. "The isolation, I mean." Pierce considered the question as he sliced potatoes into a skillet. "Sometimes, but I figure there are worse things than being alone. Being with the wrong person, for instance. That seems lonelier than any empty house." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sylvia focused on the bread she was cutting, afraid to meet his eyes. In 3 days, she had come to know Pierce Lambert as a man of quiet strength and surprising gentleness, someone who did what needed doing without complaint or expectation of recognition. He was nothing like Thomas, who had been all flash and charm on the surface, but hollow underneath. Pierce was solid, real, the kind of man you could build a life on. The thought startled her. She was still married, legally if not in any meaningful sense, and here she was thinking about another man. The guilt felt automatic, learned, but underneath it was something else. A tiny spark of hope that perhaps her life was not over, that perhaps there could be something more than the misery Thomas had left her with. On the 4th day, Pierce announced that the weather had cleared enough to make the journey to his main ranch house. "You will be more comfortable there," he said, as he saddled his horse, a big bay gelding named Copper. And it is time I got back to regular work. I have a couple of ranch hands who are probably wondering if I froze to death. The ride took them through country that was breathtaking in its winter beauty. Rolling hills dotted with pines, mountains rising sharp and white against an impossibly blue sky. Sylvia rode behind Pierce, her arms around his waist, and tried not to think about how safe she felt pressed against his back, how right it seemed to be here with him instead of struggling alone. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, a sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch and glass windows that spoke of prosperity. Behind it stood a barn, several outbuildings, and a network of corrals where horses watched their approach with pricked ears. Two men emerged from the barn as they rode up, both weathered and lean in the way of men who worked with their hands. "Boss!" The older of the two, gray-haired and bow-legged, grinned widely. "Thought maybe you decided to winter in town." "Not likely, Marcus." Pierce dismounted and helped Sylvia down, his hands steady on her waist. "Had some unexpected business. This is Mrs. Anderson. She will be staying with us for a while." Marcus tipped his hat, his eyes curious but not unkind. The younger man, barely into his 20s with red hair and freckles, did the same. "Madam," Marcus said, "I am Marcus Powell, and this young pup is Jamie Tucker. Anything you need, you just let us know." Pierce showed Sylvia through the house, and she was struck by how clean and orderly everything was. The main room held a large stone fireplace, comfortable furniture worn soft with use, and bookshelves lined with volumes that suggested Pierce was more educated than his rough exterior implied. The kitchen was well equipped, the windows curtained with simple fabric. Upstairs, he showed her to a bedroom that was spare but pleasant, with a real bed and a washstand and a view of the mountains. This was meant to be a guest room, Pierce said, setting her few belongings on the dresser. He had retrieved what little she had from where she had collapsed, though there was not much. A locket with her mother's picture, a handkerchief with her initials embroidered in one corner. "You can stay as long as you need to." "I cannot just live here as a guest indefinitely," Sylvia protested. "Let me work for my keep. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I am not afraid of hard work." Pierce studied her for a long moment. "If that is what you want, but you are recovering still, so do not push yourself too hard." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Sylvia, you are safe here. I want you to know that. Whatever you decide to do with your future, no one is going to hurt you or abandon you while you are under my roof." After he left, Sylvia sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry. Not from sorrow this time, but from relief so profound it felt like a physical weight lifting from her chest. For the first time since Thomas had driven away, she allowed herself to believe that she might survive this, that there might be a life on the other side of the devastation. She settled into a routine over the following weeks. She cooked meals for Pierce and the ranch hands, kept the house clean, mended their clothes, and sewed new shirts from fabric Pierce bought in town. The men treated her with respect and gratitude, and she found satisfaction in being useful, in contributing rather than being a burden. The work was hard but honest, and she fell into bed each night, tired in a way that felt good, clean, nothing like the exhausted despair that had characterized her last year with Thomas. Pierce fascinated her more with each passing day. He was up before dawn and rarely stopped moving until well after dark, but he never complained, never took his frustrations out on those around him. He was fair with his men, paying them well and treating them like partners rather than servants. He was patient with the animals, could gentle a skittish horse with soft words and steady hands. In the evenings, he often read by the fire, and when she asked about the books, he shared them readily, seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. "Did you have much schooling?" Sylvia asked one night in late January as they sat together after Marcus and Jamie had retired to the bunkhouse. She was working on a shirt. He was reading a volume of Shakespeare. "More than most ranch hands, less than a proper gentleman," Pierce replied, setting the book aside. "My mother was a school teacher before she married my father. She made sure I could read and write and cipher, taught me history and literature when the day's work was done. She said education was the one thing no one could take from you." His expression softened. She died when I was 16. Pneumonia. Sometimes I think she would be happy knowing I did not waste what she gave me. She would be proud of you, Sylvia said quietly. You have built something substantial here, and you are a good man. That matters more than how many books you have read. Pierce met her eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. You miss her, Sylvia continued, your mother, every day. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the fire. She was the kind of person who made everyone around her better just by being present. When she died, it felt like the light went out of the house. He glanced at Sylvia. What about you? What were your parents like? Sylvia set down her sewing, surprised by how much she wanted to talk about them. My father was a clerk, very proper and serious. My mother was warm, always laughing, always finding joy in small things. They balanced each other. When the fever took them within days of each other, I think they would have wanted it that way. Neither of them could have borne to live without the other. That is how it should be, Pierce said. When you love someone, really love them, they become part of you. Losing them should feel like losing a limb, not like shedding excess weight. The words were not aimed at Thomas specifically, but they struck home nonetheless. Sylvia looked down at her hands, at the ring she still wore because she did not know what else to do with it. I thought I loved him when I married him. Now I wonder if I ever knew what love was, or if I was just lonely and desperate for someone to care about me. You were young, Pierce said gently, and he was a practiced liar. That is not your fault. How do you know he was a practiced liar? You never met him. Because no decent man treats a woman the way he treated you, which means he either lied about who he was from the start, or he changed into someone else and lied about the reasons why. Either way, he is a liar and a coward. Pierce stood and moved to poke at the fire, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. You deserve better than what he gave you. The statement was simple, matter-of-fact, but it made Sylvia's throat tighten with emotion. She had spent so long being told she was inadequate that her failures as a wife had driven Thomas to drinking and gambling and eventually abandoning her. Hearing someone say she deserved better felt revolutionary, like permission to stop carrying guilt that had never been hers to bear. February brought a thaw, the snow melting into rushing creeks and muddy ground. Sylvia had been at the ranch for 2 months, and the hollow look had left her face, replaced by color in her cheeks and a brightness in her eyes that came from regular meals and honest work and the absence of fear. She caught herself humming as she worked, found herself looking forward to the evenings when Pierce would come in from the range and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. She was falling in love with him. The realization came one morning as she watched him through the kitchen window, working with a young horse in the corral. He was endlessly patient, letting the animal come to him rather than forcing the issue, rewarding the smallest signs of trust with gentle praise. There was something deeply attractive about his competence, the way he moved through the world with quiet confidence, never needing to prove himself but never backing down when challenged. It was more than attraction, though. It was the way he remembered she did not like onions in her stew, the way he brought her wildflowers when he rode in from the far pastures, the way he listened when she talked as if her words mattered. It was waking up each morning, knowing she was safe, knowing the day would hold honest work and kind companionship, knowing she had value beyond what she could provide for a man's comfort. The problem was Thomas. Legally, she was still his wife, bound by vows that seemed meaningless now, but still existed in the eyes of law and society. Even if she wanted to pursue something with Pierce, and she increasingly did, she could not while that tie remained. The thought of Thomas made her stomach clench with anxiety. What if he came back? What if he decided he had made a mistake and tried to reclaim her? She did not want to go back to that life, would fight with everything she had to avoid it. But did she have the legal right to refuse? She brought up the subject with Pierce one evening in early March, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I need to know where I stand, legally, with Thomas. Pierce set down the harness he was mending and gave her his full attention. What do you want to know? Can he force me to go back to him if he changes his mind? Do I have any rights, or am I just his property to do with as he pleases? You are not property, Pierce said firmly. And Nevada has different laws than most places. We have had divorce legislation on the books for years. If you can prove desertion, which you absolutely can, you have grounds to dissolve the marriage. Hope flared bright and painful in Sylvia's chest. Truly? I could be free of him? You would need to establish residency, which means living in Nevada for 6 months. Then you file a petition with the court, provide evidence of the desertion, and if the judge agrees, the marriage is ended. Pierce leaned forward. You have been here 2 months. 4 more, and you can start the process. Will you help me? The question came out smaller than she intended. Vulnerable. I do not know how to navigate courts and lawyers. I do not even know if I can afford it. I will help you, Pierce promised. And do not worry about the cost. We will figure it out. The spring transformed the ranch into something beautiful. Green grass pushing up through the mud, trees budding with new leaves, wildflowers carpeting the meadows in brilliant color. The work intensified with the season, cattle to move to summer pastures, foals to be worked with, fences to repair after the winter damage. Sylvia found herself taking on more responsibilities, helping Marcus with the garden, learning to handle the chickens and milk the cow, even trying her hand at riding under Pierce's patient instruction. You are a natural, he told her one afternoon after she successfully guided her horse through a series of turns without assistance. They were riding along the creek that formed the eastern boundary of his property, the water high and fast with snowmelt. You sit a horse better after a few weeks than some people do after years. Sylvia laughed, flushed with pleasure at the compliment. I think you are being generous, but I will take it. I never imagined I would enjoy this so much. In Philadelphia, ladies did not ride except in the park, very sedately, more for show than anything else. What made you leave? Philadelphia, I mean. Pierce brought his horse alongside hers, close enough that their legs almost touched. You have mentioned your parents dying, but you must have had friends, people who could have helped you. I did, Sylvia admitted. But Thomas was so charming, so convincing when he talked about the opportunities in the West. He made it sound like an adventure, like we would build an empire together and be fabulously wealthy within a few years. My friends tried to warn me that I did not know him well enough, that it was too fast, but I did not listen. I wanted to believe in the fantasy he was selling. We all make mistakes, Pierce said. The question is what we do after. You could have given up when he left you, let yourself die in that snow. But you fought, you survived. That takes courage. It did not feel like courage. It felt like desperation. Sometimes they are the same thing. Pierce reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. Sylvia, I want you to know something. These past months, having you here, it has been the best time I can remember in years. You have made this house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep between workdays. I look forward to coming in each evening, knowing you will be there. I look forward to talking with you, hearing your thoughts, seeing you smile. He paused, his green eyes intense on hers. I am trying to say that my feelings for you have grown beyond friendship, beyond simple hospitality. I am not asking you to do anything about it right now, not while you are still legally tied to him. But when you are free, if you want to explore what this could be between us, I would consider myself the luckiest man in Nevada. Sylvia's heart hammered against her ribs, her breath catching in her throat. Pierce, I feel the same way. I have for weeks now, but I did not think it was appropriate to say anything while I am still married, while I am living under your roof and dependent on your kindness. You are not dependent, Pierce corrected gently. You work harder than most men I know. You have earned your place here a dozen times over. This is your home as much as it is mine, for as long as you want it to be. I want it to be forever, Sylvia said, the words escaping before she could think better of them. I know that is too much too fast, but I cannot lie about how I feel. You have given me not just shelter, but hope, not just safety, but joy. You have shown me what it means to be valued, to be respected, to be cared for by a good man. I love you, Pierce Lambert, and I will love you for the rest of my life if you will let me. Pierce's face broke into a smile that transformed his serious features into something almost boyish. He dismounted quickly and reached up to help her down, then pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. I love you too, he said into her hair. From the moment I found you in that snow, I felt connected to you in a way I have never experienced with anyone else. It was like the universe put you in my path because we were meant to find each other. They stood there for long minutes, wrapped in each other's arms beside the rushing creek, and Sylvia felt something inside her shift and settle, like a bone that had been out of joint finally sliding back into place. This was right. This was real. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The next 4 months passed in a blur of happiness, tempered by impatience. Sylvia and Pierce were careful to maintain propriety, aware that any hint of impropriety could jeopardize her divorce petition. She kept her room upstairs, he kept his downstairs, and they did not allow themselves more than chaste kisses and hand-holding despite the desire that hummed between them like an electrical current. Marcus and Jamie pretended not to notice the looks that passed between them, the way Pierce found excuses to be near Sylvia, the way she lit up whenever he entered a room. In July, with 6 months of Nevada residency established, Pierce hired a lawyer from Carson City to draw up the divorce petition. The lawyer, a middle-aged man named Howard Green, was sympathetic to Sylvia's situation and confident about their chances. Desertion cases are fairly straightforward, he explained during their meeting in the ranch house parlor. We will need you to testify about the circumstances of your husband leaving, and it would be helpful if we could locate witnesses who saw you immediately after. Mr. Lambert's testimony will be crucial there. Whatever you need, Pierce said from his position, standing behind Sylvia's chair, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. When can we expect a hearing? The circuit judge comes through Carson City in September. I will file the petition next week, and we should have a date set within a fortnight. The waiting was difficult. Sylvia found herself anxious and distracted, jumping at unexpected sounds, plagued by nightmares where Thomas returned and dragged her away. Pierce was endlessly patient, talking her through her fears, reminding her that the law was on her side, that she was not alone in this fight. The hearing was scheduled for September 15th. Sylvia dressed carefully that morning in a simple blue dress Pierce had bought for her in town, her hair pinned back neatly, her hands trembling as she tried to fasten her buttons. Pierce came upstairs when she called for help, his own clothes uncommonly formal, dark trousers, and a pressed white shirt with a string tie. You look beautiful, he said as he helped with the buttons, his fingers gentle on her back. And brave, I am so proud of you. I am terrified, Sylvia admitted. What if the judge does not believe me? What if he thinks I am exaggerating, or that I somehow deserve to be abandoned? Then the judge is a fool, Pierce said firmly. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. But he is not going to think that, because the evidence is clear. Howard knows what he is doing. This time tomorrow, you will be free. The courthouse in Carson City was an imposing brick building that made Sylvia's stomach clench with nervousness. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than she had expected, wood-paneled and smelling of old paper and furniture polish. Judge Martin Cartwright was an older man with silver hair and a stern expression that did not soften when they entered. The proceedings were mercifully brief. Howard Green presented the facts with clinical efficiency. Sylvia's marriage to Thomas Anderson in Philadelphia in 1872, their journey west, Thomas's mounting debts and increasing instability, his decision to abandon his wife on a remote trail in the middle of a December blizzard. Pierce testified about finding Sylvia collapsed in the snow, about her condition when he brought her to shelter, about the efforts to locate Thomas that had turned up nothing except confirmation that he had sold their wagon and horses in Reno and purchased a ticket to San Francisco. Sylvia testified last, her voice shaking at first, but growing stronger as she told her story. She did not embellish or dramatize, simply stated the facts: that Thomas had told her she was a burden he could not afford, that he had driven away without providing for her safety or welfare, that she had not heard from him in the 9 months since, despite settling in a location where she could be easily found if he cared to look. Judge Cartwright asked few questions, his expression unreadable. When the testimony concluded, he was silent for a long moment, studying the papers before him. "Mrs. Anderson," he finally said, his voice gravelly with age, "I have presided over many divorce cases in my career, and I have seen many reasons why marriages fail. What your husband did to you is among the most cowardly and reprehensible acts I have encountered. No man worthy of the name would leave his wife to die in a blizzard, regardless of whatever financial or personal troubles he faced." He signed a document with a flourish. "Your petition is granted. The marriage between Sylvia Rose Anderson and Thomas Michael Anderson is hereby dissolved. You are free to remarry without restriction or waiting period, should you choose to do so." The relief was so overwhelming that Sylvia's knees buckled, and only Pierce's quick reflexes kept her from falling. He steadied her, his arm around her waist, and she could feel him trembling too, the tension that had been coiled inside both of them finally releasing. Outside the courthouse, in the bright September sunshine, Pierce turned to her with a smile that made her heart skip. "You are free." "I am free," Sylvia repeated. And then she was laughing and crying at the same time, throwing her arms around Pierce's neck. He spun her in a circle, both of them giddy with relief and joy. They had dinner at Carson City's finest restaurant to celebrate, a luxury Pierce insisted on despite Sylvia's protests about the expense. Over roast beef and potatoes and apple pie, they talked about the future, about plans they had been afraid to voice too loudly before now. "I want to marry you," Pierce said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Not next year or next month, but soon as you are ready." "I am ready now," Sylvia said without hesitation. "I have been ready since March, if I am honest. I do not need a big ceremony or a long engagement. I just need you." "Tomorrow, then," Pierce said, his eyes dancing. "We can find a preacher tomorrow and make this official." "Tomorrow," Sylvia agreed, her smile so wide it made her cheeks ache. They were married the next afternoon in a small church in Carson City, with Marcus and Jamie standing as witnesses and Howard Green joining them to celebrate. Sylvia wore the same blue dress from the hearing, with wildflowers in her hair that Pierce had picked that morning. Pierce wore his good clothes again, looking more handsome than any man had a right to be, his hands steady as he slid a simple gold band onto her finger. "I promise to love you, protect you, and stand beside you for all the days of my life," Pierce said, his eyes locked on hers. "I promise to build a life with you that is filled with honesty and respect and joy. I promise that you will never doubt your worth or your place in my heart." Sylvia's vows were simpler, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise to love you with everything I am, to be your partner in all things, to make our house a home filled with warmth and laughter. I promise that I will never take for granted the gift you have given me, the gift of a second chance at happiness." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Pierce kissed her, it felt like a promise and a benediction and a beginning all at once. They spent their wedding night at a hotel in Carson City, a lovely room with lace curtains and a real feather bed. Pierce carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of the room. Then his expression turned serious, almost nervous. "I want you to know that I will not rush you," he said quietly. "I know you have been through things with your first husband that I cannot begin to understand. If you need time, if you want to wait, I will respect that." Sylvia stepped close to him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "I am not afraid," she said. "Not with you. You have shown me nothing but kindness and patience and love. I trust you completely." What followed was tender and sweet. Pierce taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished, showing her with hands and lips, and whispered words that she was precious to him. It was nothing like the awkward, uncomfortable experiences she had endured with Thomas, where she had felt used rather than loved. With Pierce, she felt like a partner, a beloved, someone whose pleasure mattered as much as his own. Afterward, lying wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heartbeat, Sylvia felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "What is wrong?" Pierce asked immediately, tilting her chin up to look at her. "Nothing is wrong," she said, smiling through her tears. "Everything is so perfectly right that I keep thinking I must be dreaming, that I will wake up and find myself back in that snow, dying alone." "You are not dreaming," Pierce said, kissing her forehead, her nose, her lips. "This is real. We are real. And I am going to spend every day for the rest of our lives making sure you never doubt that." They returned to the ranch the next day, arriving to find that Marcus and Jamie had decorated the house with wildflowers and ribbons, a wedding present that made Sylvia laugh and cry at the same time. Over the following weeks, she moved her things from the guest room into Pierce's room, transforming it from a bachelor's sparse quarters into a shared space that reflected both their personalities. Life settled into a new rhythm, similar to what it had been before, but different in crucial ways. Now, when Pierce came in from working the range, he could kiss his wife properly, could pull her into his arms without worrying about propriety. Now, when they sat together in the evenings, she could curl up against his side, his arm around her shoulders, completely at ease. The physical intimacy grew naturally between them, comfortable and affectionate, a language they were learning together. October brought the first real cold, a reminder of how Sylvia had come to be here. She stood at the window one morning, watching snow begin to fall, and felt Pierce's arms wrap around her from behind. "Are you all right?" he asked, his chin resting on top of her head. "More than all right," Sylvia said, leaning back against him. "I was just thinking how different everything is from a year ago, how lost I was, how hopeless, how I never imagined I could be this happy." "I think about it too," Pierce admitted, "about how easily I could have ridden a different trail that day, or left an hour earlier or later, about how close I came to never finding you. But you did find me." Sylvia turned in his arms to face him. "You found me and saved me and gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. I will be grateful for that every day." The winter was gentler than the previous one, or perhaps it just felt that way because Sylvia faced it from inside a warm house, surrounded by love, with a future that stretched bright and promising before her. She and Pierce talked about expanding the ranch, maybe bringing in more cattle in the spring. They talked about children, both agreeing they wanted a family but were in no rush. They talked about growing old together, sitting on the porch in rocking chairs watching their grandchildren play. Spring of 1877 brought changes to the ranch. Pierce bought an additional 100 acres from a neighbor looking to retire, which meant more work but also more opportunity. Marcus's son came out from Missouri to join the operation, a capable young man who fit right in. And in April, Sylvia realized her monthly courses had not come, and a visit to the doctor in Carson City confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was pregnant. Pierce's reaction when she told him was everything she could have hoped for. He let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses, picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "Are you feeling all right? Should you be standing? Do you need to sit down?" His concern was so earnest and overdone that Sylvia laughed until tears ran down her cheeks. "I am perfectly fine," she assured him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not going to break." Still, Pierce fussed over her throughout the pregnancy, bringing her breakfast in bed, insisting she rest more, nearly driving her mad with his hovering. Marcus and Jamie found it endlessly entertaining, teasing their boss about being wrapped around his wife's finger. Sylvia bore it with good humor, secretly touched by how much Pierce cared, how invested he was in both her welfare and their babies. The child came in late December, almost exactly 2 years after Pierce had found Sylvia in the snow. Labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Sylvia understood why women feared childbirth, why so many did not survive it. But Pierce was there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, murmuring encouragement and love, and somehow that made it bearable. When the baby finally arrived, red-faced and wailing, the doctor announced, "You have a son." A son. Sylvia watched through exhausted tears as Pierce held their baby for the first time, his large hands surprisingly gentle, his expression one of absolute wonder. The baby quieted in his father's arms, tiny fingers wrapping around Pierce's thumb, and Sylvia felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it was almost frightening. They named him Peter James Lambert, after Pierce's father and Sylvia's. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's green eyes and a temperament that seemed to alternate between peaceful contentment and determined stubbornness. Pierce was besotted from the first moment, staying up with Sylvia for late-night feedings, even though he had to be up before dawn for ranch work, playing with the baby any chance he got, showing him off to anyone who came within speaking distance. "You are ridiculous," Sylvia told him fondly one evening as she watched Pierce conduct a serious conversation with their 3-month-old son about the proper way to mend a fence. "He is brilliant," Pierce said with complete seriousness. "See how he is listening? He understands every word. He is drooling on your shirt. A sign of his intelligence. He knows his father's shirt is a safe place to drool." Sylvia laughed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was her life now, a good man who loved her beyond reason, a beautiful child, a home that was truly hers, work that was meaningful, days filled with purpose and joy. The scared, broken woman who had collapsed in the snow felt like a different person, someone from another lifetime. As Peter grew, the ranch prospered. Pierce proved to be as good a father as he was a husband and rancher, patient and affectionate, teaching his son about horses and cattle and the land. Sylvia took on more responsibility in managing the household and the business side of the operation, discovering a talent for organization and numbers that surprised them both. They worked as partners in every sense, making decisions together, supporting each other's strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. 2 years after Peter's birth, Sylvia delivered a daughter they named Sarah Margaret, after both their mothers. She was a tiny thing, delicate and beautiful, with blonde hair that curled at the ends and her mother's blue eyes. Peter was enchanted with his baby sister, appointed himself her protector, and could often be found sitting beside her cradle, telling her stories in his childish voice. The years rolled by in a procession of seasons and milestones. Peter's first day helping his father with the cattle, Sarah's first words, the expansion of the ranch to 500 acres, Marcus's retirement and his son taking over as foreman, the arrival of a third child, another boy they named Michael Thomas, always called Mikey, who was pure mischief from the moment he learned to crawl. Through it all, Pierce and Sylvia's love deepened and matured, settling into something solid and enduring. They had their disagreements, of course, moments of frustration or tension that come with any life shared. But they had learned how to fight fair, how to listen to each other, how to apologize and forgive and move forward stronger than before. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Pierce surprised Sylvia with a trip back to Carson City, their first time away from the ranch and children for more than a few hours. They stayed at the same hotel where they had spent their wedding night, ate at the same restaurant, walked through the town that had borne witness to the legal end of her first marriage and the beginning of her second. "Do you ever think about him?" Pierce asked that evening as they strolled through the twilight, his arm around her waist. "Thomas, I mean." Sylvia considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not in the way you might think. I do not wonder if he is well, or wish things had been different. Mostly I think about how grateful I am that he left me that day. If he had been a better man, if he had kept me with him, I never would have found you. I never would have had this life." She stopped and turned to face her husband. Every good thing in my life came from the worst thing that ever happened to me. That seems strange, but I would not change it. I would not trade a single day of what we have built together for all the security or comfort my first marriage might have provided. I feel the same, Pierce said, pulling her close. That day, I found you in the snow. I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. I never imagined I was finding the other half of my soul. The other half of your soul? Sylvia teased gently. That is very poetic for a cowboy. I have my moments, Pierce said with a grin. Then his expression turned serious. I mean it, though. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sylvia Lambert. You and our children, this life we have built. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is the truth of my life. And mine, Sylvia whispered, standing on her toes to kiss him. Always and forever mine. They returned to the ranch renewed, ready to face whatever the future held. And there was much to face. Peter was growing fast, already talking about taking over the ranch someday, showing his father's aptitude for working with animals and the land. Sarah was proving to be artistic, filling every available surface with drawings and watercolors, asking for piano lessons they arranged through a music teacher in town. Mikey was still young enough to be mostly chaos, but even he was starting to show signs of the person he would become, curious about everything, fearless in a way that gave his mother heart palpitations. In the spring of 1890, 15 years after Pierce had found Sylvia in the snow, they stood together on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The children were inside, Peter helping Mikey with his schoolwork, Sarah practicing the piano piece she would perform at the church social next week. From the barn came the sounds of the ranch hands finishing the day's work, horses nickering for their evening grain, the eternal rhythms of a working ranch. What are you thinking about? Pierce asked, his hand finding hers naturally, fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. How far we have come, Sylvia said. How impossible it would have seemed that December day if someone had told me this was my future. 3 beautiful children, a successful ranch, a husband I love more than words can say, a community where I am respected and valued. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I was so lost, Pierce, so broken and hopeless. You did not just save my life that day. You gave me a reason to live it. We saved each other, Pierce corrected gently. I was going through the motions before you came, working myself to exhaustion to avoid thinking about how lonely I was, how empty the house felt at the end of the day. You brought light and warmth and purpose. You turned a house into a home, a ranch into a family legacy. Everything good in my life came from that moment when I decided to take the long trail home, when I looked down and saw you lying in the snow. He turned to face her, his green eyes still as intense as they had been all those years ago. Thank you for fighting to stay alive that day. Thank you for being brave enough to start over. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me, for loving me even when I did not deserve it. You have always deserved it, Sylvia said fiercely. You are the best man I have ever known, and I would choose you 1,000 times over, in any lifetime, under any circumstances. Pierce kissed her then, slow and sweet, a kiss that held 15 years of love and partnership and unwavering devotion. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling, that special smile that was just for each other, that their children recognized as proof of the love that was the foundation of their family. Inside, the piano music stopped, and they heard Sarah call out, "Mama! Papa! Supper is ready!" "Coming!" Sylvia called back. She looked up at Pierce one more time. "Ready?" "Always," he said, taking her hand. "As long as I am with you, I am ready for anything." They walked into the house together, into the warm glow of lamplight and the cheerful chaos of their children, into the life they had built from the ashes of loss and the gift of second chances. Behind them, The sun completed its descent, painting the Nevada sky in shades of violet and indigo, day giving way to night in the endless cycle that governed their world. And in that moment, Sylvia understood with perfect clarity that she had found what so many people spent their whole lives searching for: a home not defined by walls or location, but by the people you loved and who loved you back. She had found it in the most unlikely way, in the darkest moment of her life, and she would be grateful for that gift every day she had left. The years continued to flow by, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Peter grew into a fine young man, eventually taking on more and more responsibility at the ranch as Pierce's hair began to gray at the temples. When Peter turned 21, he married a school teacher from Carson City, a smart and kind young woman named Eleanor who fit into the family as if she had always been there. They built a house on the far edge of the property, close enough to be part of the ranch operations, but far enough to have their own space, their own life. Sarah, true to her artistic nature, went east for a year to study at an art academy, then returned to Nevada and opened a studio in Carson City. She painted portraits and landscapes that captured the wild beauty of their home, earning a reputation that drew clients from as far away as San Francisco. She married later than her brother, at 25, to a journalist who appreciated her talent and independence, who supported her career as enthusiastically as Pierce had always supported Sylvia's contributions to the ranch. Mikey was the wanderer of the family, working on the ranch through his teenage years, but always dreaming of what lay beyond the horizon. At 19, he announced his intention to join a cattle drive to Wyoming to see more of the West before settling down. Pierce and Sylvia let him go with their blessing, understanding that some people needed to roam before they could truly appreciate home. He wrote letters faithfully, full of adventures and observations and promises to return. Through all of this, Pierce and Sylvia remained the steady center of their family's universe. They aged together gracefully, silver threading through their hair, lines deepening around their eyes and mouths, but the love between them never dimming. If anything, it grew stronger, seasoned by decades of shared experiences, tempered by the trials they had weathered together. When Peter and Eleanor's first child was born, a boy they named Pierce after his grandfather, Sylvia held her grandson and marveled at the circle of life, at the legacy she and Pierce had created. This child would grow up surrounded by love and stability, would never know the fear and desperation that had once defined his grandmother's existence. He would take for granted the things she had learned to cherish: a safe home, parents who loved each other, a community where he belonged. "What are you thinking about?" Pierce asked, standing beside her as she rocked the baby. They were in Peter and Eleanor's parlor, the rest of the family scattered through the house, the warm buzz of conversation and laughter filling the air. "About how far we have come," Sylvia said, the same answer she had given 15 years earlier on their porch, "about how this little one will never know a world without love and safety because we built it for him." "We did," Pierce agreed, his hand resting on her shoulder. "And Peter and Eleanor will build on what we started, and their children will build on that. It is a good legacy, Sylvia. The best kind." As the sun set that evening, the whole family gathered for supper at the main ranch house, the table extended with extra boards to accommodate everyone. Sylvia looked around at the faces illuminated by lamplight. Pierce at the head of the table, still handsome despite the years, still commanding respect and love in equal measure. Peter beside him, so like his father in manner and bearing. Eleanor holding baby Pierce, her face glowing with new motherhood. Sarah and her husband visiting from town, already arguing good-naturedly about whether the mountains were better painted in oils or watercolors. Even Mikey's absence felt present in the stories they told, the letters they read aloud, the place set for him in hope of his eventual return. This was what she had almost missed by dying in that snow. This abundance of love, this richness of connection, this profound sense of belonging and purpose. The thought of how close she had come to losing it all, to never knowing this joy existed, made her breath catch. Pierce noticed immediately, as he always did. He reached across the corner of the table to take her hand, his thumb rubbing across her knuckles in the familiar gesture that meant, I am here. You are safe. We are together. Thank you, Sylvia mouthed to him, not wanting to interrupt the flow of conversation around them. He knew what she meant, understood the gratitude that went beyond words, the acknowledgement of all he had given her. He squeezed her hand gently and mouthed back, Thank you too. Because that was the truth of their love, the foundation of their marriage. They had saved each other. He had pulled her from the snow and given her physical life, but she had pulled him from loneliness and given him purpose beyond survival. Together, they had created something neither could have achieved alone, a family and a legacy, and a love story that would be told in whispers for generations. When Sylvia was 73 years old, she fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of the doctor and the devoted nursing of her family, she grew weaker, her breath coming in shallow gasps, her body finally giving out after decades of hard work and good living. Pierce never left her side, holding her hand, talking to her even when she could no longer respond, telling her stories about their life together, reminding her of all the joy they had shared. On a cold December morning, with snow falling softly outside the window and her entire family gathered around her bed, Sylvia drew her last breath. Pierce was holding her hand, his own eyes wet with tears, his voice steady as he whispered, Thank you for everything, my love. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. Sylvia's lips curved in the faintest smile, her eyes fixed on Pierce's face, and then she was gone, slipping away as peacefully as one might fall asleep after a long day's work. Pierce lived for 3 more years after Sylvia's death, staying active on the ranch, playing with his grandchildren, watching his family grow and flourish. He never remarried, never even considered it. When people asked if he was lonely, he would shake his head and say, How can I be lonely? She is with me every moment. I see her in our children's faces, hear her in our grandchildren's laughter, feel her presence in every room of this house. We had 48 years together, and I will carry those years with me until I join her. He died in his sleep one winter night, peacefully, with a smile on his face. His family liked to think he had dreamed of Sylvia, of the young woman he had pulled from the snow all those years ago, of the life they had built from that moment of chance and courage and grace. They buried Pierce beside Sylvia in the small cemetery outside Carson City, under a headstone that read, Pierce Lambert, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. Below it, someone had carved a line that captured the essence of his life. He found her in the snow and gave her the world. And below that, added by one of the grandchildren, she gave him everything in return. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, a testament to what Pierce and Sylvia had built together. In the ranch house, which was preserved and expanded but never fundamentally changed, there hung a portrait Sarah had painted of her parents in their middle years, standing together on the porch with the mountains behind them. Pierce's arm was around Sylvia's waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder, both of them smiling with the quiet contentment of people who knew exactly how lucky they were. And every December, when the snow began to fall across Nevada, the Lambert family would gather at the ranch and tell the story of how it all began. With a cowboy riding home on a winter day, with a woman collapsed in the snow, with the kind of courage it takes to trust a stranger, with the kind of love that transforms 2 broken people into something whole and beautiful and enduring. It was a story about second chances and unlikely rescues, about choosing love over fear, about building something lasting from the wreckage of what came before. It was the story of Pierce and Sylvia Lambert, and it was told with reverence and joy, a reminder to each new generation that love, real love, was worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth celebrating in all its messy, complicated, glorious reality. And in that story, in that legacy of love that rippled out through time, Pierce and Sylvia lived forever, Two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and had made of that finding something extraordinary. They had taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into the beginning of everything good, everything beautiful, everything true. That was the real magic of their story, the part that made people's eyes mist with tears even decades after both of them were gone. Not just that he had saved her life, but that they had saved each other's souls, had given each other permission to be fully human, fully loved, fully alive. They had proven that it was never too late for a new beginning, that the darkest moments could give way to the brightest light, that love, when it was real and true and deep, could heal wounds that seemed unhealable. The Lambert Ranch still stood more than a century later, a working cattle operation managed by Pierce and Sylvia's descendants, people who carried their blood and their legacy and their story. The house had been modernized over the years, but traces of the original structure remained, and in the parlor, carefully preserved behind glass, were artifacts from that first winter. The flannel shirt Sylvia had worn when Pierce found her, the locket with her mother's picture, the marriage certificate from September 1876, written in careful script and signed by a preacher who had died long ago. These were the relics of a love story, physical evidence that it had all been real, that two people had lived and loved and built something that mattered. And when the young people of each generation asked why these things were so carefully preserved, why the family made such a fuss about them, the elders would smile and say, "Because they remind us where we came from, because they show us what is possible when you refuse to give up, when you open your heart to love even after it has been broken, when you believe that tomorrow can be better than today." And so the story lived on, passed from parents to children to grandchildren, a tale of the Old West that was also a tale as old as time, the story of two people who found each other when they needed it most, who built a life of meaning and purpose from the raw materials of second chances, who proved that love, real love, could conquer anything, survive everything, and leave a legacy that lasted forever. In the end, that was what mattered most, not the acres of land or the successful ranch or even the children and grandchildren, though all of those were precious. What mattered was that Pierce and Sylvia had loved each other completely, had treated that love as the sacred thing it was, and had shown everyone around them what it looked like when two people committed to building something beautiful together. They had started with nothing but hope and determination, with a cowboy's kindness and a woman's courage, with the willingness to trust when trust seemed impossible. And from that humble beginning, they had created an empire of love, a dynasty of devotion, a legacy that would outlive them by centuries. That was the true story of Pierce and Sylvia Lambert, the cowboy who found a woman dying in the snow, and the woman who gave him a reason to truly live. It was a story of redemption and second chances, of faith and perseverance, of the transformative power of love when it is freely given and gratefully received. And it was a story with a happy ending, the best kind of happy ending, not one where everything was perfect, but one where two people faced life's challenges together, celebrated its joys together, and built something lasting together. They grew old side by side, loved each other until their last breaths, and left behind evidence of that love in the family they created and the life they built. Decades after their deaths, when the winter wind blew cold across the Nevada landscape and snow fell softly on the ranch they had built, their descendants would look out across the land and feel their presence, not as ghosts, but as guardians, as the foundation upon which everything good in their lives had been built. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Pierce and Sylvia were together still, hands intertwined, hearts beating as one, their love eternal and unbreakable, a testament to the truth that some bonds transcend mortality, that some stories never really end, and that love, when it is true, lasts forever and always.